Hi guys! Alright, so I'm here again to read another chapter in The Witches. When we left off, the little boy was in the meeting room and found out that it's a meeting of all witches. And he passed out and he's stuck in this room. So we're going to find out what happens. Frizzled like a fritter. All the women, or rather the witches, were now sitting motionless in their chairs, staring as though hypnotized by somebody who had suddenly appeared on the platform. Then somebody was another woman. The first thing I noticed was this woman, and was her size. She was tiny, probably no more than 4.5 feet tall. She looked quite young. I guessed about 25 or 6. She was very pretty. She had a rather stylish long black dress that reached right on the ground. She wore black gloves that came up to her elbows. Unlike the others, she wasn't wearing a hat. She didn't look at me like a witch at all, but she couldn't possibly not be one. Otherwise, what on earth was she doing there on the platform? And why? So there's a picture of the witch. For heaven's sakes, were all the other women gazing at her with such a mixture of adoration and awe and fear. Very slowly, the young lady on the platform raised her hands to her face. I saw her gloved fingers unhooking something behind her ears, and then she caught hold of her cheeks and lifted her face clean away. The whole of that pretty face came away in her hands. It was a mask. As she took off the mask, she turned sideways, placed it carefully upon the small table nearby, and when she turned around again and faced us, I was very nearly screamed out loud. That face of hers was the most frightful and frightening thing I had ever seen. Just looking at it gave me the shakes all over. It was so crumpled and wizened and shrunken in and shriveled, it looked as though it had been pickled in vinegar. It was a fearsome, ghastly sight. There was something terribly wrong with it, something foul and putrid and decayed. It seemed quite literally to be rotting away at the edge, in the middle of the face, around the mouth, cheeks. I could see the sickened and canked and worm-eaten, as though maggots were working away in there. There are times when something is so frightful you become mesmered by it, and you can't look away. It was like that now. I was transfixed. I was numb. I was magnetized in sheer horror of the woman's features, but there was more to it than that. There was a look of serpents in those eyes of hers that flashed around the audience. I knew immediately, of course, that this was none other than the Grand High Witch herself. I knew also why she had worn a mask. She would never have moved around in public, let alone book in a hotel, with her real face. Everyone who saw her would have ran away screaming. The doors, shouted the Grand High Witch in the voice that filled the room, bounced around the walls, and they're chained and bolted. Are they chained and bolted? So here, she took the mask off, and she's all, well, that's scary. The doors are chained and bolted, your grandness, answered the voice in the audience. The brilliant snake's eyes were set so deep that the dreadful, rotting, worm-eaten face glared unblinkingly at the witches who sat facing her. You may move your gloves, she shouted. Her voice, I noticed, had the same hard, metallic quality that her voice of the witch I had met under the conker tree, only it was far louder and much, much harsher. It rasped, it grated, it snarled, it scraped, it shrieked, and it growled. Everyone in the room was peeling off her gloves. I was watching her hands and those in the back row. I wanted very much to see what her fingers looked like and whether her grandmother had been right. Ah, yes, I could see several of them now. I could see their brown claws curving over the tips of her fingers, and they were about 2 inches long, those claws, and sharp at the ends. You may remove your shoes, barked the Grand High Witch. I heard a sign of relief going up from all witches in the room as they kicked off their narrow high-heeled shoes. And then I got a glimpse. Under the chair, several pairs of stockings, feet square, completely toeless, revelating they were, and as though the toes had been sliced away from their feet with a carving knife. "You may remove your figs," snarled the Grand High Witch. She had a peculiar way of speaking. There was something sort of foreign accent there, something harsh and brutal, and she seemed to have trouble pronouncing the letter W. As well as that, she did something funny in the letter R. You could roll it round and round her mouth like a piece of hot pork crackling before spitting it out. "Remove your vig and get some." So there's a picture of her hands taking off the gloves and then her feet. I don't know. Her fingers, her toes. "Fresh air in the spotted scalp," she shouted, and another sign of relief arose from the audience as all their hands went up and their hands and the wigs, all with hats still on them, were lifted away. There now appeared in front of the row upon bald female heads a sea of naked scalps, every one of them red and itchy looking from being rubbed up the linings of wigs. I simply cannot tell you how awful they were. Somehow the whole sight was made more grotesque, because underneath those frightful scabby bald heads, the bodies were dressed like a fashionable and rather pretty clothes. It was monstrous. It was unnatural. "Oh, heavens," I thought. "Oh, help. Oh, Lord, have mercy on me. These foul, bald-headed females are child killers, every one of them. And here I am, imprisoned, in the same room I can't escape." At the point of new, undoubtedly horrifying thought struck me. My grandmother had said that there was a special nose hole that could smell out a child in a pitch-black night from right across the other side of the road. Up to now, my grandmother has been right every time. It seemed certainly, therefore, that one of the witches in the back row was going to sniff me out at any moment and then yell, "Dogs, trappings," would go all over the room, and I would be cornered like a rat. I knelt on the carpet behind the screen, hardly daring to breathe. And then I remembered another very important thing my grandmother had told me. "The dirtier you are," she said, "the harder it is for a witch to smell you out." How long since I had my last bath? Not for ages. I had my own room in the hotel, and my grandmother never bothered with silly things like that. Come to think of it, I don't believe I had a bath since we arrived. When had I last washed my hands or face? So here are all these bald witches. Certainly not this morning, not yesterday either. I glanced down at my hands. They were covered with smudges and mud, and goodness knows what else besides. So perhaps I had a chance after all. The stink waves couldn't possibly get out through all the dirt. "Witches in England," shouted the Grand High Witch. She herself, I noticed, had not taken off either her wig or her gloves or her shoes. "Witches in England," she yelled. The audience stirred uneasily and sat up straighter in their chairs. "Miserable witches," she yelled. "Useless, lazy witches. Feeble, furbling witches. You are a heap of idle, good-for-nothing vermins." A shudder went through the audience. The Grand High Witch was clearly in an ugly mood, and they knew it. I had a feeling that something awful was going to happen soon. "I'm having my breakfast this morning," cried the Grand High Witch, "and I'm looking out of the window at the beach. And what am I seeing? I'm asking you, what am I seeing? I am seeing a revolting sight. I'm seeing hundreds, I am seeing thousands of rotten, repulsive little children playing in the sand. It is putting me right off my food. Why, have you not got rid of them?" she screamed. "Why, have you not rubbed them all out, these filthy, smelly children?" With each word she spoke, flecks of pale blue phlegm shot from her mouth and little bullets. "I'm asking you why," she screamed. Nobody answered their question. "Children smell," she screamed. "They stink out the Lord. We do not want these children around here." The bald heads in the audience all nodded vigorously. Von children, a week is no good to me, the Grand High Witch cried out. Is that the best you can do? We will do better, murmured the audience. We will do much better. Better is not good either, shrieked the Grand High Witch. I demand maximum results. So here are my orders. My orders are that every single child in the country shall be rubbed out, squashed, squeezed, squivered, and fritted before I come here again in 1 year's time. Do I make myself clear? A great gasp went out from the audience. I saw the witches all looking at one another with deeply terrible expressions. I heard one witch at the end of the front row saying aloud, all of them. We can't possibly wipe out all of them. The Grand High Witch whipped around as though someone had struck a skewer into her bottom. Who said that? She snapped. Who dared to argue with me? I vows you, vows it not. She pointed the gloved finger at a sharp needle at a witch who had spoken. I didn't mean it, your grandness, the witch cried out. I didn't mean to argue. I was just talking to myself. You dared argue with me, screamed the Grand High Witch. I was just talking to myself, cried the wretched witch. I swear it, your grandness. She began to shake her with fear. The Grand High Witch took a quick step forward and then spoke again. It was in her voice that made the blood run cold. A stupid witch who answers back must burn until her bones are black, she screamed. No, no, begged the witch in front row. The Grand High Witch went on. You foolish witch with a witch a brain must sizzle in the fiery flames. Save me, cried the wretched witch in the front row. The Grand High Witch took no notice of her, and she spoke again. You idiotic witch, you are roast upon a barbecue. Forgive me, oh your grandness, cried the miserable culprit. I didn't mean it, the Grand High Witch continued her terrible recital. I vetch you dares to say I'm wrong, will not be with us very long. A moment later, a stream of sparks that looked like tiny white hot metal filings came shooting out of the Grand High Witch's eyes and flew straight towards one who had dared to speak. I saw the sparks shrinking against her, burrowing into her, and she screamed horrible howling screams of puff of smoke that rose up around her. A smell of burning meat filled the room. Nobody moved. Like me, they were all watching. There's the witch. The smoke and when it had cleared away, the chair was empty. I caught a glimpse of something wispy white, like a little cloud, fluttering upwards and disappearing out of the windows. The great sigh rose up of the audience. The Grand High Witch glared around the room. I hope nobody else is going to make me get cross today, she remarked. There was a deathly silence. Frizzled like a fritter, the Grand High Witch cooked like a carrot. You will never see her again. Now we can get down to business. That's the end of that chapter. Tomorrow we'll read Formula 86 Delayed Action Mouse Maker. So, I hope you all have a good day. I miss you all. Mwah.